What's up, Adam?
Another week of crazy, right? We own businesses.
Yep.
Businesses are crazy. That's kind of the theme of everyone we've been working with lately. It's like crazy. I don't know if it's spring's coming and everyone's waking up and realizing, holy shit, I have to do production and almost the whole quarter's gone, or if it's wow, I actually did pretty well and that means there's more work to come. But it's been crazy for a lot of people. I know there's some astrological things some of our clients have been telling us, which whether you believe it or not, it's interesting stuff. What was that thing they were telling us?
Today, retrograde. Mercury goes into retrograde tomorrow, the 14th. So from March 14th to April 6th, Mercury is in retrograde.
Yeah, so they were telling us that, and like, so you may hear this after that fact, but there's people are trying to put the reason behind what's going on in its place.
hmm
And the theme that I've been seeing a lot with our clients is that they've really made it as a business owner, but they're
Right.
still living in the past. Like we had one woman, and she had to spend a bunch of money on relocating and buying different things, and it was very expensive. You know, the movers and the new lease, handling two different offices at the same time, and like she was stressed out about, oh my gosh, like I have to spend all this money and it's really, I can't spend the money. But she has the money set aside. I'm like, well, what's the money for? Emergencies. I'm like, well, is this an emergency? Like, do you have to do these things? And like, oh my God, I have to spend time with my child because unfortunately our child was injured and I have to spend time with my child and I can't do these things at work and I'm trying to do all this stuff. I'm like, but everyone got served, all your clients got served, and the things got done. I'm like, this is what you built. And we've seen this with multiple of our clients where they're like freaking out about money or time, and they're acting as if they're still in the past. And that's what I mean is like, you've made it as a business owner, but you're living in the past. And it's like everything you built, everything you did was to get here so you could spend this money, so you could use your time differently, right? And too many people I'm finding are just sitting and living 3, 5 years ago. Like, I'm still that person, but they're not. They're actually, they have changed completely with their circumstances. It's just they haven't yet accepted it, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. It's I've made all this progress, but I still feel like the same person, right? A lot of times people feel like they haven't necessarily fully changed unless they're really looking back and seeing everything that they've accomplished. And it's also habitual, right? This is what we talk about, like with sabotaging behaviors and limiting beliefs. And what I'm seeing a lot of our clients do is as they're making progress and they're moving forward, they when they get stressed out or when they build up this overwhelm, right? We've been talking about the chaos that surrounds a lot of them, is they're building up all of their old mechanisms that and how they used to react and how they used to behave, and they just have not fully solidified their new behaviors or their new habits, and it's just easy to go into default mode, right? That's what I call it, right? We all have a default mode, right? You're a computer, you have a default mode. And I think stress and overwhelm and anxiety and fear and all of those emotions bring about the default mode that we have. And even though we've upgraded our system, even though we've, put in the upgrades and done all this stuff, we have not really gotten, the computer may not be able to handle it. The hardware of the computer may not be able to handle it. And that's when we usually go buy a new computer, right? I don't know why this took me on a tech way, but it really makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? Because when a computer breaks down or a computer's not functioning right, what do? You do the Control Alt Delete and you reset the computer, right? And that puts you back into default mode and goes back to the original operating of where the computer last was. And I think that's what a lot of business owners experience, is that when the stress and the chaos comes, they hit the Control Alt Reset button and it's like, holy shit, like, why did I go through all of that? And then they realize that they went through it. See, and that's the progress piece, that they actually can realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I didn't need to default back to that. I'm not that person. But sometimes it's just a recognition of going into default mode to recognize that you've been upgraded. Your systems have been fully upgraded, and now you have to act like the upgrade. Don't act like the default mechanism. And it happens because of these evolutions that I talk about, like going through comfort zones and going through fear zones and learning zones and growth zones. And once you go to a growth zone and you've accomplished it and you've been there for a while, you reset back into this comfort zone, and then you hit a ceiling, and you keep taking on these behaviors because you became comfortable again. And you have to challenge yourself to go back out and relearn and regrow so that you can keep making the progress. But it's the comfort that we default back into. And when we're stressed, we see it the most. And that's what we've been seeing. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. People are very afraid of what's going on in the economy and all of that stuff. And they're listening to all that noise, and it's causing the upgraded system to not function properly in the environment that it's in.
No. I agree with you. And to stay on that same computer analogy, what I'm saying is instead of them trying to reset their existing computer, when they've made it as a business owner, but they're living in the past, what I mean is they bought a new computer and it's just sitting on the shelf. They haven't even opened the box. Like they're just using the old computer. The new computer's right there, man. Just open the box and use it. Like, you paid all this money, you did all this research, you got all the tech specs that you need for your computer, and it's like, it's going to allow you to do all these great things, but you leave it in the box. And it's like, hey, man, open the box.
Open the box, use it.
Meaning spend the money that you've acquired on the things for the purpose that you acquired it for. Use the time that you now have bought back through employees or efficiency for the things you said you were going to do. Everything you did was to buy this computer, and now you bought it. You're not in debt. You own it. It's time to unbox it and use it. It can't sit on the shelf collecting dust. And that's what many of these people are doing with their businesses. They acquire this money or this time or both, and they're leaving it on the shelf collecting dust because they're still living in the past. Like, what if I open that computer and all of a sudden someone steals it and it's gone? I have to remember how to use the old computer. I have to da-da-da. What if all of a sudden I plug it in and there's an electrical surge and the thing goes up in flames and I don't have that computer anymore? And that's how they're acting with their money. They're with their time. They're like, what if I don't have this time anymore and I commit this time and I can't do it? What if I commit this money to the thing and I don't make any more money? And it's like, hey, bro, you have built over the past 3-4 years this thing, so you will continue to have this money. You will continue to have this time. But what they're doing is living in the past like they never bought that computer, like they never acquired that time or money. That's what I'm saying.
And sometimes it's because they're afraid they don't know how to use that new computer yet, right? They've built maybe all the things and they've tried all the things and they've practiced it, but they're still not feeling fully skilled in it yet. And they may not be ready to open up that computer, but you're right, they have to. Go to the box, open the box. But this is part of it.
I don't think I'm going to disagree with you there. I don't think it's they don't have the skills to use it. I don't think it's that. I literally believe they're still living in the past. They're acting today as who they were 3 years ago.
Well, and that
they
happens.
have the skill, Tom. They have
the
ability.
They do. Yeah. They have the skill, but they're still living in the past, right?
That's my whole point of this is that they've moved
but
physically, but they have not moved mentally.
Right. And part of that is, they have transformed as a business owner, but no one else around them has, right? So when you're surrounded by the same people, the same environment, the same things, even though you've transformed as a business owner and the rest of the world hasn't, you still default back into the old ways because you feel either wrong or you feel out of touch and you're afraid to lose certain relationships. And one of the things that I'm really thinking about that we really have to emphasize when we start talking to clients and beginning any type of coaching experience with them is to help them recognize that this is a transformative process. Becoming a business owner is extremely transformative. It will change your life. It will change your business. And like I've always said for all the years I've been coaching, that when you start to work on you, whether it's your life, your business, or everything all together, everybody else will appear different. Because you will be different in how you see them and how you operate with them and how you communicate with them and how you work with them. And when you get stressed out, you'll slip into those comfort zones and you'll rely on those people to support you, but they're the wrong people to support you at that time because you've been transformed. You can't have this same group of friends. You can't have the lack of other business owners in your world that you can commiserate with and speak to. And you need a new community. And I think when you fail to acknowledge that it's a transformative process, that's what only forces this default mechanism we're talking about and not opening up the new computer. Is because you may not have built all the right support structures around you to support you when you're ready to use that new computer.
Again, this is why I like talking with you, because I'm not going to disagree. I'm going to take it a different angle, and it's similar, but I think with that scenario, it's not that you need necessarily. You could certainly benefit from a new support system and growing with your growth. Growing your circle with your growth. You certainly could benefit from that. But what I find in that transformation is that people retain these expectations of other people to grow with them, right? And it's like, hey, my family or my friends or my colleagues, like I've moved so fast and so far, and you have these expectations that, number one, they understand what you did to get where you are. They understand where you are, and they understand that, hey, you're supposed to keep up with me. And when we have people that are living in that expectation of like, all right, the whole world moves together at the same pace, they get frustrated and disappointed and angry that like, hey, how come you don't understand why I can't go out this Saturday night and party? Or how come you don't understand that I can go golfing on a Tuesday morning because I've freed up my life that way? Or how come you can't understand that, yeah, I can buy a vacation house? And like, why are you acting like I'm bougie now? Like, no, this is just, I worked my ass off to get here. And some other people are not accepting of that. And some get jealous, some get angry, some think you've lost touch with reality and da, da, da. And it's not necessarily that they're wrong, they're the same. And that's what Tom's saying is you have transformed, or we have transformed as people, as business owners. And as that evolution happens, other people may not. They may stay exactly who they were and where they are. And it gets frustrating to the person who's made the transformation because they're like, why can't you just understand? Why aren't you keeping up with me? And that's where all these emotions come. And it's a range of them. And I think that is where that fear, as you're saying, comes because they've actually moved out of the comfort, because you always talk about these 4 zones, right? They've moved out of the comfort into the fear. And the only way to then get back to growth again is you have to learn, right? It's comfort, fear, learn, growth, right? Those are the 4 zones. So the only way to get through that, right, is to now learn, like, and this is one of the ways I've personally learned, is like, oh, they're fine. I'm the one who's different.
Exactly. And, you brought up something really important. It's the expectations that we have for other people and versus what we have for ourselves. And a lot of times when we have expectations for other people, we get disappointed because we have those expectations. And we have to recognize we just have to have expectations of ourselves. And that, that was a critical conversation that we had with one of our clients this week is, it's a husband and wife team, and they had a change in the dynamic of their relationship in terms of understanding that, holy cow, I'm holding you to these expectations that I don't need to hold you to. And I'm disappointed in you because of the expectations, not disappointed in you, the person. It's I'm disappointed now in myself because of the expectations I created for you. And we have to be very careful with what are the expectations that we have of other people. And we have to be aware of what their expectations may be of us, right? So to the point, like the vacation home and not appearing bougie. Well, if I work my ass off, I expect to acquire those things over time. But you can't see me as bougie because I did the work to get there if you're not doing the work. Raise the expectation of yourself, just like I raise the expectation of myself, and don't have this expectation that I'm going to stay where you are, because I'm not.
But I think that could be part of what their problem is they are thinking that way. They are thinking like, raise the expectation of yourself. And those people like, I'm just fine. I'm fine exactly who I always was. And you find that a lot with business owners dealing with salaried employees who are friends or spouses or anything else, is they're like, hey man, I'm just grinding it out until I'm 65 so I can get to the promised land. Where business owners are like, hey man, I'm in the promised land, but I ain't never getting to 65. 65 comes, there's no end.
No,
Like, and they're living on different planets, right?
it's different realities.
But sometimes that
Yeah.
frustration can stem from them thinking that way of like, no, just take care of yourself and you'll have this too. And they're like, what do you mean? I punch a clock and I do this thing. Or what do you mean? We've always lived this way and we've always done this thing. Why is it different all of a sudden? I think, yes, communication is key, but you can have your own personal expectations, but you certainly can't have expectations of others to understand where you are or keep up with where you're at. And it goes the inverse too. When you're really struggling, they're not going to understand. I'm like, why are you struggling? Like, because I'm self-employed. Like, what do you mean? They're like, what do you mean? What do I mean? It's like, you can't expect them to understand that, like, hey, I got to work 3 times as hard to make the same amount of money, right now, because things are dire and things are tough and people, they won't understand both sides of that. And, to switch on because we're talking about people who have made it and they're living in the past, but then there's people who have started. And what I'm finding a lot with many of the people that we work with on that side of the equation, people who are just starting, most of them are in our 5WH simple selling system. The people who are starting are expecting it to come so easy. It's almost the opposite of these people. They're like, hey, they have this expectation. Like, shouldn't it just, I take the system, I do the thing, come so easy? And a lot of the issue is come with, what we really coach them and teach them on, and through our course is to learn how to prospect and learn how to sell, and learn how to eliminate sabotaging behaviors, pay attention to their, have really good attention management and pay attention to that, and then remove some of these limiting beliefs. And as they learn these skills and they go deploy them, they're like, it's so logical to them. And they think, well, it's just going to work, right? It's just like, this thing is just going to work. And they take those things verbatim. And anything you've ever learned in your entire life, whether it was learn how to swing a baseball bat or learn how to be a doctor in college or whatever it is, when you get in the real world and you apply these things, you have to tweak them to your own personal way of who you are, or the field that you're playing on. If you're a doctor and you learned all these things and you're operating in this type of facility versus that type of facility, you're going to have different tools with you. You're going to have to use different things. If you're a baseball player and you're playing in one league, you may use a metal bat. In another league, you may use a wood bat. And you still know how to swing, but you got to try different things. And what I have noticed really about these people is that they're especially with the outreach, right? They've married an outreach, right? They're like, oh, I'm the guy who DMs on LinkedIn, or I'm the person who, does email campaigns, or I'm the guy who goes to networking meetings. And that's their thing. They're married to it. And they're like, this is the thing that I do. What the problem is that's the only thing that they do. Okay. And then they're expecting that to work. I'm like, how come it's not working? Well, because the people you're talking to actually communicate and operate in different mediums. So you may be DMing them and how come no one's responding? How come no one's responding? But it may be like, no, you need to send them an email. Or you may be the guy who's leaving voicemails and like, how come it doesn't work? Every time someone leaves me a voicemail, I pick it up and like, no, that doesn't work. You may need to send them a text message. Where I'm going with this is as you're starting a new venture, whether it's a new project, a new business, a new career, you're going to have to find your way with your target market and how do they communicate. And even within your target market, they may also have sub-communication divisions, right? And like some people will communicate on this method and others will communicate on that method. But if you get so married to, well, I communicate this way, why don't they communicate that way? It just doesn't work. And until you get to a place where you can demand, hey, if you want to communicate with me, you should probably do it this way. And I have explained this to people of like, I looked at my emails earlier today and it was over 3,600 unread emails for Atomic Business Coaching. Okay. And the thing is people who really want to communicate with me know, like, okay, if I really need Adam, I'm going to either reach out to Tom and Tom's going to be like, hey, you got to get back to Adam, or they're going to go and find me on LinkedIn and they're going to communicate with me on LinkedIn. And some of them have my personal cell phone and they can text me there and they'll get me. But they slowly learn like, oh, if I email Adam, I'm not going to get him. Now, in the beginning of my career, I would have to have inbox 0. Because I relied on every one of those communications. They were vital to my success. Now they're not. Now, I probably am leaving money and opportunity on the table by not checking every single email. But I'm in a position now where, as stupid as that may sound to leave it on the table, It's not my priority. My priority is communicating with the people I am working with, and they know how to communicate with me. And if they don't, they're not going to work with me. So what I'm finding is people want that. They want to have that ability, which is like, no, hey, this is the way I operate, and either you're on the bus or you're not. Either you're doing this with me or you're not. But in the beginning, you have to be very open to communicating in ways that you would have never done in the past, and you maybe don't like, and it's annoying to you, and you have to get to inbox zero, and you have to use DMs that you never used, and you have to give out a cell phone number so they can text, and you have to leave voicemails, which almost nobody's going to answer. But you're going to have multiple methods of outreach to move from, hey, I found a prospect, to we're having a meeting, and then I'm closing the sale. Because in between those three major things, there's a lot of other communication, reminders that we're going to show up, following up to scheduling new appointments, all these things happen. And if you don't know how that person or that demographic communicates, you're going to miss out on the thing you were working on. It's just such a tough thing I see for these newer business owners.
Yeah, it's really tough because hey, it's like learning a new skill. It's taking a new perspective on something, and everybody is always looking for that one thing I can do that will help me solve all my problems, right? Everybody always wants the one answer. They want the easiest answer. They're not willing to do the hard work to get to what they need to accomplish. And what you have to be is flexible. And if your old way of doing things is not flexible, is not adaptable, is not innovative, or if you're not willing to take initiative, you're going to struggle because you're going to create a reality that really is nobody else's reality. It's not understood by anybody else. And communication is such an important part of everything that we do in business. And if you don't know how to communicate with people via text, email, post, DM, whatever it is, there's a million ways to communicate that we just want one way because it's our way and it's the most comfortable for us. And we have to be adaptive to be able to come out of another comfort zone, right? You come out of so many comfort zones in your first few months to your first few years of business. You come out of comfort zones that you didn't even know you had. And until you find your way and your groove and what works best for you, and you look back at all the different ways and you look for the trends of what works for you, you're not going to know unless you had tried everything else in the process, right? We've tried everything, Adam. We've tried DMing. We've tried posting. We've tried phone calls. We've tried email campaigns. We've tried text messaging. We've tried all of that stuff. And what does it come down to that really works for us, that we know works really well for us, is networking and getting networking and then getting the referrals from that network. And that's the mode of communication and the effort that we have to put into things. But if we didn't do all those other things to see what works, you're going to lose a lot of opportunity, right? So part of the reason why you don't check your email could be very simply, that's not a method that has worked for us and is not going to work for us going forward. So stick to what we know. But that's come through a lot of experimentation. And, it brings up another, communication is such a big part of this transformative process. And we were mentioning before about expectations of other people and how they have expectations of us. And, when you look at a lot of partnerships or you look at business in general, when you're working with a customer, you're working with a partner, you have to know how you're going to communicate with that person moving forward. And in partnerships, especially when it's a husband and wife team working together, you have to realize that not just your business relationship changes, but your marital contract changes or your relationships contract changes. And you have to go back to what I like to call with my wife, the negotiating table, right? At every step of the way where you make a change in your life and business, you cannot forget about the people that you're with, and you can't forget about your family dynamic. And you have to go back and reset certain boundaries, and you have to be flexible and adaptive, and you have to ask your family to be the same, is be willing to adapt to a new way, but it all has to be discussed and out in the open. Because what we're seeing a lot, and we're seeing this in people who are husband and wife partners and people who are not husband and wife partners in the business, but we see marriages take these rocky roads when new businesses start. And when it evolves to a point that the partner did not realize it was going to get to because the conversation was never had. And it causes a lot of disruption in trying to build your business, right? It brings about it's another distraction that now gets in the way of you getting to the place that you want to be. You know, you want to level up, you want to move forward, but everybody is still dragging ass behind you. And it goes back to living in the old ways and all of that. But you have to change the dynamic of your partnership if that's going to work for you.
Do you have to change the dynamic of your partnership, or do you have to keep up with what you agreed to in the partnership?
Well, I think you have to agree or see where that agreement is no longer possible.
What I mean is, like, all right, so if you have a partnership, whether it's marriage or business, right, you made some form of agreement. Hey, we're going to enter into this thing together to do that thing together, right? So you started somewhere, right? And you made this, hey, here's what we're going to do. And along that route, yes, someone may change, but is the change like, hey, we have to amend the contract, or is the change, I have to still live up to what I originally agreed to?
Yeah, it could be both. It could be one or the other. I don't think either is right or wrong. I think you have to.
Well, think about a marriage. Think about a marriage for a second, right? You got married. You said, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's who I am as a person. Here's how I work. Here's how I live, right? And here's my hope for the future. Mm-hmm. And then you go in and do that, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going to open a business now.
Right.
And like the spouse who has a secure job is like, okay. And then you go on about your merry way, and they're still doing what they originally agreed upon, and you're off doing things that they're like, what the hell is this? So how the hell do they feel?
They could feel very ostracized. They could feel very much like you changed this was not what we agreed to. Sometimes you alter the contract and there is no negotiation or conversation about it. And it creates disruption in your, like, listen, I'll be married 20 years this year. And I look back over the last 20 years and how many times my wife and I have agreed to certain things and then I either went and changed it, right? And I'm the first one to admit I'm the one that's always been changing or being the catalyst for the change in it. But there's been other times where she has had to change how she sees things and what she expects. And I think a lot of people go through this, and they don't recognize, they become... It causes them to feel this lack of alignment and this anger and sometimes resentment towards one another. And a lot of it's because you never sat down and spoke about it. And that's what I'm trying to get people to do, is sit down and talk about what it is that is changing, that you can still live up to, and what you can't still live up to, right? And that's the thing. It's a change. When we do change management, we talk about start, stop, and continue, right? What are we going to start doing? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to continue to do? And I think you have to approach that in every partnership, in every marriage, when part of the dynamic shifts. Is what can I continue to do? I can continue to do X, Y, and Z, but I need to start doing this, and I need to stop doing that. And that's how you have to come to the table and present that and see if you're both on the same page. Because if you don't get on the same page, it's okay if you're at different places in your life, but if you can't get on the same page, it's going to cause this misalignment that's going to interfere and distract from the business that you're actually trying to build. And we're starting to see that with some clients that are struggling in their relationship, that it's distracting them from getting to where they have set their goals to be for the business. And maybe a reality check is maybe that is not possible, what they've decided to do on the side of the business, because it's not worth the cost of the relationship or what have you. And that's where you have to decide, do we amend or do we keep the same and just have to work at it differently?
Well, see, my whole life I've always just approached partnerships different. And maybe that's the thing, is maybe many of these people don't know they're in a partnership, right? They think they're on a solo journey. And I mean, I'll give you personal examples. When I decided to sell my businesses last year and go all in on atomic business coaching, it was an idea, something that I wanted to change. Discussed it with you, Tom. I discussed it with my two other business partners, Frank and Russ. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this. But I did not make that change until I discussed it with you. I discussed it with Frank. I discussed it with Russell. And then I still could not make that decision until I discussed it with my main partner, my wife. And I went out to dinner, scared shitless that she wouldn't want me to do this or wouldn't be on board with it. But if she said no, I wasn't doing it. right? And I didn't have to sell her on this. I had to say, hey, does this fit into our partnership the way I'm doing this? How much does this positively, negatively affect us and you and the kids and the business and the money and all the things? But I had that discussion first, right? So what I think many people are doing is they're making their own decisions and then asking for forgiveness, not permission. And I think if you're going to be a good steward of your partnership, you have to be a partner. I mean, you and I don't do anything in this business without discussing it first. You know, we do videos and everything, and I love Danny Del Vecchio. He's the greatest. He's a great friend. He's like a brother to me. And today he's like, hey, the invoice wasn't paid yet. I'm like, I know. We're debating whether or not we're going to continue using the service. And Tom and I are going to discuss in detail on Friday to see where we're at. But I communicated that directly. I didn't say, hey, oh, we'll pay the invoice. And I didn't say, hey, we're not going to. I said, I have to talk with my partner first and then figure out what we're going to do. And I told him, you know, we gave it the 90 days that we do all these things on. And now we're deciding, are we going to commit for the year? Because that's a methodology that you and I have agreed to adopt, you know, test things for 90 and then commit for a year. So it's like, okay, well, now I have to go have that discussion with my partner before I make a decision. And what I see many, many people is they forget who their partners are. And your partners are both in business and at home. I mean, your children are your partners. You have to have discussions with them before you do things, not after and say, oh, well, daddy's changed. Mommy's changed. It's like, no. Daddy is thinking of changing. How are you about that? I'm telling you this. When I sold 642 Advising, I told my daughter first. She cried. You know, she's very passionate behind the brand, behind the business, behind what it meant for our family, and she cried about it. My son was like, oh, it's cool. You know?
Yeah.
But dealing with it with my daughter was very differently because she is my partner in my family. Okay? So I think there has to be this respect to the partnership before anything is done. And that's the dynamic of it, is there is a level of respect that has to come to the partnership itself.
And you brought up a really good point. It's ask for permission or ask for forgiveness. And I think a lot of times we ask for forgiveness, that causes a lot of disruption in the partnership. We've got to be more, it's more proactive to ask for permission than to ask for forgiveness. And I think that's the key dynamic shift that maybe a lot of people need to reevaluate in all of their partnerships is, am I asking for permission or am I asking for forgiveness? And if you're asking too much for forgiveness, you need to start communicating differently and more effectively.
Well, on that note, I'm going to ask our audience for forgiveness because we went a little longer than we usually do. All right, cool. So, hey, listen, check us out. We're doing 3 really, really cool things. We are doing our course, 5WH, the Simple Selling System. You can find it. Just go to atomicbusinesscoaching.com and look under the menu for course. This is really something that Tom and I have spent the last year developing, the last 6 months curating and putting together. And now we are launching that out there in the world. So hopefully some of you that need help with prospecting, need help with selling, have to overcome your limiting beliefs, sabotaging behaviors, and would love to find a way to have better attention management through a course that's about 6 hours long, 58 modules. It's only $499 right now, even though we should be charging $2,000 for it. We're only charging $499 for it. And there are some options to work with Tom and I directly through that. Obviously, there's an additional cost to that, which also is about $499. But there are ways you can just take the course on your own, or you can come and work directly with Tom and I to help you through that. So the course is one of the main things we're doing. The second thing is our community. Our community is really built to serve itself. It's not coaching. It's not mentoring. It is built as a mastermind for everybody who's involved with this community to support and receive support from the community itself. It's called First M. You can also find that on our website. And then, as you have always known us, Atomic Business Coaching, our coaching for one-on-one is reserved for a very select few. We're very, very grateful for those clients that have decided to work with us. We are spending a lot of time networking to find the right people to work with. We don't go out there and sell people on our services. We either find them or they find us, and we're like, wow, we really align and we can help each other here. So we're very grateful for all of you who have listened to this podcast, support us in one way, shape, or form. If you know anybody who needs any of those 3 services, please direct them over to atomicbusinesscoaching.com, and we'd be more than happy to see if we are the good fit for them. Have a great day.